All right. The good news is you all just earned some carbs through all your exercise you just did. Carbs help refuel you in high intensity exercise. But continuing the talk on macronutrients, stays at carbohydrate. What are they? Simplest form, sugar. They come in many varieties. 1 sugar molecule, 2 sugar molecules, or many sugar molecules all mushed together. The single sugars are monosaccharides. Mono is the prefix for single. We have glucose, fructose, and galactose. The more common sugars that we know are disaccharides. These are going to be the maltose, lactose, and sucrose. Maltose is the sugar in beer, lactose is the sugar in dairy, and sucrose is the sugar that's in like fruits and vegetables. And then high fructose corn syrup. What that means here is you get a higher concentration of fructose relative to glucose. But all 3 of these have glucose as one of the 2 sugars in the combination. Polysaccharides come in both human and plant varieties. In humans, a polysaccharide is your glycogen, what your body stores sugar as when it ingests it, that goes both into your muscles and into your liver. They're basically the repository, the storage site for all the sugars that you ingest so that your body can call upon them when needed. Bless you, Jamie. Your liver holds between 80 and 100 grams of glycogen, and your muscle tissue, depending on how much of it you have, between 300 and 900 grams of glycogen. Think of this like the gas tank in your car. You fill up the gas tank, and if you don't drive the car, the gas isn't used. Your body's the exact same way. So if you aren't doing high intensity exercise, you don't need to continue to put more sugar into your gas tank. You already have some sugar. You're not sure if you have sugar in your gas tank? Check here. This is the storage site. Your adipose tissue is essentially excess carbohydrate that is stored for future use. When you are in need and you have not enough nutrition, your body burns that tissue, turns the adipose tissue back into glycogen. Glycogen gets turned back into glucose, which is the sugar fuel source that your cells use. In plants, we call those starches or fiber. Now, fiber comes in 2 varieties, soluble and insoluble, basically digestible or undigestible. Digestible fiber is simply like oats and bran. Indigestible is things like whole wheat, grains, anything that shows up in the toilet after you eat it, for lack of a better term. Now, what do? Specifically, carbohydrate is energy when you're in high intensity workouts. So anytime you're going at full tilt, you are burning sugar, glucose or glycogen that is turned into glucose to fuel that activity. And you have a finite amount, which is why you might have heard someone called bonking before. They're doing an event and all of a sudden they just can't keep going. They've run out of fuel. This is why marathoners and endurance athletes carry those little chew things, little chews of sugar, is to keep their blood sugar at a high level so they don't pass out and they can perform at a high level. Sugar is also involved in how your central nervous system functions. So your body needs to maintain a certain level of glucose in the bloodstream to stay upright and functioning. If you drop below a certain amount, probably felt really dizzy when you haven't had anything to eat. That's a small example of what we call hypoglycemia, low sugar in the blood. Now, most people keep their blood sugar normal through the ingestion of carbohydrate. But I'm here to tell you that isn't necessarily a necessary thing. Your body can turn ketones, which are stored fat and protein, into energy if it's trained to do so, as opposed to carbohydrate. That only happens when you keep your carbohydrate numbers low. And as I remember from the other day, the only macronutrient that's non-essential is this one. If you get enough fat and protein in your diet, you do not need carbohydrate to live. You might have a sadder life. There'll be no pizza in your diet, but you do not need carbohydrates to exist on Earth, because if you do it slowly enough, your body will adapt to using fat and protein as its main fuel sources, primarily fat. Proteins are typically only used in starvation circumstances. And last but not least, carbohydrate's not essential, but some people do use carbohydrate in the form of both probiotic and regulation, meaning just making sure you can go poop. But those are things that can happen when you take in some soluble and insoluble fiber. Now, the diet that we recommend here at the gym is a balanced diet. Does anyone remember how much in percent you should be eating carbohydrates on an average day as prescribed by CrossFit? 40. 30 is protein and fat, but 40, 30, 30. So 30% is what we recommend. Or sorry, wow, I just said it wrong. 40% is what we recommend. Can anyone guess what the American average is?
63.
80.
Good guess. Good guess. It's actually 50 to 70%. Now, of that 50, 70%, can you guys, I might have seen this the other day on Instagram, but you know how much of that is in just fat? The sugar that doesn't come from things that are all that great. Not saying your fruit sugar, I'm saying just sucrose. Pounds? Yeah, no, pounds. How many pounds do you think a year? Any guesses?
For a person or for America?
American person, on average, how many pounds of sugar they consume every year?
Sugar bag, 100. 12.
Your good guess. 110 pounds. So over double that bag that Noel was having the other day. Now, what I'm not saying here is just don't eat carbohydrate. I want to be very clear about that. Some people get like up in arms when I start doing these talks. They're like, you're like an anti-carb zealot. I'm an anti-junk zealot. You should be eating carbohydrates. Fruits and vegetables, those are all good for you. Eat those things. But if you're going to eat carbohydrate, try to pick from low glycemic, unprocessed things that you could have either grown yourself or harvested out of the earth. If it's got a label, comes in a bag, or it came in a box, don't put it in your face. That's a really easy general rule to avoid bad carbohydrates that are going to essentially fuel disease instead of a healthy human being. What questions do you guys have? So fruits are typically this, Steve. They're going to come both fructose and glucose. But the average breakdown is typically about 55, 45 glucose to fructose. Most for fruit. But when you start talking juices, you start talking things with high fructose corn syrup, this swings in the opposite. So this goes down and this goes up. And that's where we get in trouble.
Okay, and then a lot of your vegetables fall in the next category.
Yeah, vegetables are gonna fall a little bit more in this category. Mostly in the starch variety. Or primarily like cellulose, which again is mostly soluble fiber. Which is why, like, you know, people are concerned like, oh, like don't eat fruit. It's like, no, fruit is fine. Juicing your fruit or having just fruit juice is not the same as eating fruit because of the fiber that comes with it, the cellulose that's in the tissue that slows down the digestion. It's easier on the liver and easier on your digestive system.
What about the bad carbs? Which category do they fall in? Like the pizzas and the chips and
So, I mean, they're gonna all mostly be this.
yeah.
But the problem with a lot of those things, like pizza, for example, is both in nature, very rarely are both fats and carbohydrates in the same package. Typically in nature, you either have fat with protein, carb with protein. Very few things are fat and carb together. Basically, the exception in nature is like nuts and seeds. Problem with processed food is they primarily are fat and carbohydrate together. And they know via our physiology that those are like the two most addictive food items to put on our palate, which is why we have trouble like stop eating. So like even when people adopt a healthy lifestyle, they're like, oh, I eat lots of nuts and seed, and they're eating like a jar of Planters like cashews a day. They're like, I can't lose any weight. And it's like, that's because you're eating something that's really hard to stop eating. When fat and carbohydrate are together, it's hard to put them down. Any other questions? Cool. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out. Hope you had fun. Go home and eat some 40, 30, 30. 40% carb, 30% protein, 30% fat. Thanks, guys. Is that your version?